The tea is hot. And what does T stand for? The truth. So I am at the desk today for no particular reason other than a change of scenery because yes, it is a sit-down video. Once again, I know that I said this video this week would be a vlog. Vlog coming next week. But I felt that this video was a little bit more pertinent given recent events. And I really didn't have any like super eventful days this week. So here we are.
Special guest.
What's your video about?
Different powerlifting federations and comparing all the drug tested federations.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, wait. What's that? To the people.
You talk.
Showing the people what they want. What they want.
Bye, Matt.
Since milkshakes was such a hit last time. So as you can see, today we will be talking about the 3 major powerlifting federations, as well as comparing the different drug-tested options available to you as a lifter. This is basically a video giving you alternatives to the USAPL. Hopefully this shows I am not too biased. Even got it on the pants. For anyone who doesn't really know what's been going on in drug-tested powerlifting, I will link some resources below. I'm not going to go over it here for the sake of time. And there's a good chance a lot of the people watching this video know what's going on, but if you do not, I will link some resources below. So first things first, I'm going to give a brief overview into each federation, and then I'm going to compare each drug-tested federation or division. I'll be outlining the pros and cons to all the federations, but again, if you're interested in maybe one topic but not the other, timestamps will be listed below. I wanted to share my personal experiences with each of these federations so y'all can see any and all opinions are coming from a place of experience. So starting with the USAPL, I've been watching nationals since I think 2016. Whatever year was Daniela Mello's first year competing was my first year watching. So obviously I had a very good first experience watching it, watching a freaking like 17-year-old deadlift over 400 pounds was just mind-blowing to me. And I've streamed nationals I think every year since pretty much, and I've watched the Arnold a couple times in person. The USAPL was my first choice to compete in, being a really large fed, being drug tested. But at the time, they just never really had like a lot of meets that were convenient to me in terms of location. Bear in mind this is like 4 years ago, but I did live in Charlotte, North Carolina, so it's not like I was like in the middle of nowhere. Plus I was watching a lot of Mark Bell's videos and he would kind of talk about the different rules of different federations. And the USAPL to me just seemed like that they had a lot of rules that were like just really nitpicky and not really necessary. So in my mind, the USPA was just more fun. So the pros to the USAPL, most centralized events in powerlifting that attract a lot of high-level lifters and get a lot of hype every year in the Arnold, Nationals, and Worlds. I think that's why the USAPL draws a lot of former athletes who are natural, because they like having a clear path to the top. When you're an athlete in a sport, you have like districts and then regionals and then nationals. So I think a lot of people really like that. I also think there's more clout in the USAPL for lifters on the top of their weight class. For example, I can name the top lifter in pretty much every weight class in the USAPL, and I don't even follow the USAPL that closely. But in all fairness, I used to follow it a lot closer. I think it's just, one, it's a bigger community and it's a very active community, but also the lifters at the top of their weight class are at a very high level. So I think if you do very well in the USAPL, you can kind of accumulate a pretty decent following. Cons to the USAPL include they are money-centric. They mostly just care about making money and their pipe dream of getting into the Olympics. They don't really care about the experience of not only the lifters, but also the people watching. The judging is so strict, a lot of times to the point where, for me, it hinders the experience as a spectator. But also, they don't let spectators record at nationals. So if your Meemaw comes out to watch you at nationals and she just wants to record a quick clip of her grandkid lifting, she can't do that. And the kicker is she's probably not going to even post it to Facebook because she either doesn't have a Facebook or she doesn't know how. So now on to the USPA. I started competing in the USPA because they had a drug tested division and I preferred it to compete against lifters who were also drug tested. I do want to point out that competing in a tested federation does not guarantee that all the lifters are drug free, but also competing in an untested federation or division does not necessarily mean that all the lifters are on steroids. I have seen and know of many natural lifters who compete in the USPA at untested meets just because they're the most convenient in terms of timing and location. I just wanted to point that out because I talk to a lot of lifters who see that they have a meet close to them and they get really excited until they see that it's untested and they're like, well, I don't want to compete against a bunch of people on steroids. Well, that's usually not the case. Now, the strongest people in each weight class will probably be on something, but if you just want to go, have fun, add to your total, then an untested meet can be perfect. Untested meets also don't take as long because they don't have to collect urine from all of the top lifters. So the pros of the USPA, I really felt like the USPA kept all of the important or necessary rules that the USAPL had, and I felt like they just got rid of all the ones that were kind of silly. They allow you to bench with your heels up. They allow you to lift your head up slightly when you bench. And I don't think they require you to wear a t-shirt when you deadlift. I don't even think they require it for female lifters. They normally have more local meets going on in any given calendar year. Judging is not quite as strict, not as many rules as the USAPL, and their meets are a lot of fun and very enjoyable and still pretty well run. That's one thing I forgot to mention about the USAPL is the music at their meets sucks. I don't know what they're like on a local level, but on a national level, they're pretty bad. So some cons of the USPA, their national level meets really don't get a lot of hype. I think a big part of it is they don't really live stream their tested or untested nationals. From what I can recall, and if they do, it's not nearly as well done as USAPL nationals. That is one place where I give the USAPL a lot of credit. I think another part of it too is the caliber of lifting that goes on at USPA nationals is just not on the same level as the USAPL for the drug tested side of things. Like, I've seen a lot of people compete at their very first USPA drug tested meets and off of that total alone qualify for USPA nationals. Like, it should be a little bit more difficult than that. I think the people who do take powerlifting very seriously do compete USAPL, and it's simply because they were there first. They offered very strict drug testing and they were the first to do it very well. And then outside of nationals, there's really no big events in the drug tested side of the USPA. However, I do think that might start to change this year and next year with the recent events in the USAPL, especially if Garrett Fear's meet is any foreshadowing of that. Another con for the USPA is it's kind of expensive to compete in. I would say depending on what state you're in, it's the most expensive one to compete in. A USAPL membership is $65, and I think entry fees are normally around that price. USPA membership, I think, is around $60, but then their entry fees are normally close to $100, $107 if you get that meet insurance. So yeah, of all the federations, I think the USPA is the most expensive one to compete in. So cons to the USPA as of right now, their national events don't get a lot of hype, they're not live streamed, the drug tested side doesn't really have any really huge events going on throughout the year, there is not as much clout in the USPA, and their drug testing just isn't quite on the same caliber as USAPL, but we will go more into that later. And I will kind of address if that even really matters. RPS, I will keep this very brief, but I had to include them because they are a really big federation, especially for people who like to compete with wraps or single ply or multiply who also want to be on steroids. So I lovingly refer to RPS as the king of the backyard feds. They've also been coming under fire lately for a lot of very questionable calls, but I do think that kind of depends on the meet director and the caliber of the refs there. But as far as RPS goes, I think it's a great federation for people to compete in if they are just starting out. RPS tends to have a lot of events going on across the state during any given calendar year. A lot of them are usually in pretty convenient locations. All the local RPS meets I've ever been to have run very quickly, but I've also heard otherwise from other competitors in other states. And believe it or not, they do have a drug-tested division. This is the elite powerlifting division, elite. But unfortunately, you do have to pay extra to be in this division. So pros, they also don't charge membership fees, which I think is awesome. I think they just charge the entry fee, which is normally between $80 and $100. A lot of meets in a calendar year, usually in convenient locations, very quick meets, and usually pretty enjoyable to be at and spectate. Cons, not very strict judging. I have seen many lifters switch from RPS to USPA and then bomb out because they get used to squatting higher. Another con would just be that it's just not as big as the other two federations. And now we will be comparing the drug testing between the USAPL, USPA, and the RPS. USAPL has been known as the gold standard for drug testing. I would say that of all the lifters at any given meet, I think they drug test the most. USPA is only required to drug test 10% of the lifters at every competition, and I'm pretty sure it's at discretion of the meet director and or judges. I know with the USAPL, they may drug test multiple people per weight class, especially at larger level meets. The USAPL also famously makes all of their top level lifters register their location at any point in the year so that they can be randomly drug tested, and this is something that all the lifters in the USAPL agree to. However, the reason why I don't think this is as much of a brag as a lot of people claim that it is just because if you're competing in a tested federation and you're smart about it, when you're in your off season, you're probably going to come off cycle. And lifters in the USAPL don't always announce every time that they're randomly drug tested, but from what I've seen, it's normally when it's like deep in the off season. And again, it would just be so dumb for anyone to be running anything. But even if you are on stuff, there are always ways to beat a drug test. So I reiterate that drug tested does not always mean drug free. On the other hand, with the USPA, like I said, they normally drug test about 10% of the lifters at any given meet. Usually I think they just take the top Wilks along with the best lifter, male and female. But one reason why I trust the USPA as a drug tested federation is because they do offer many meets throughout a calendar year that are untested. This makes it pretty much pointless to compete in the USPA drug tested because they give you that option to compete taking whatever you want, and you don't have to worry about it, and you can take as much or whatever you want. So it's a big risk for very little reward. Another thing too is with there being a little bit less clout in the USPA, again, there's just not as much reward for competing drug tested when you have the option not to. I think the reason why you have people in the USAPL who compete on gear or have done gear and then cycle off and compete in the USAPL is because there is a lot of clout in it. They feel like if I get this total, I'll get these followers, and then if I go to nationals, I'll get this amount of followers and whatever. Not saying it's as easy as having a big total and gaining a lot of followers. You still have to be like compelling to follow. And then the RPS, again, you do have to pay, I want to say like $100 or $150 just for a drug test, which I think is pretty lame. I think the federation should just absorb that cost of getting a lifter tested, and if they fail it, obviously the lifter has to pay, but if they pass, then like I said, the federation should just have to absorb that cost. But I think that so few lifters opt to be tested that's why they charge them. I don't know. But if you really wanted to compete in the RPS and you wanted to be in a division where you are competing with other people who are natural, there's an option for you. So there you have it. I hope this helped you if you are trying to decide what federation to compete in, or if you're trying to figure out what route you want to go to, if you want an option outside of the USAPL. And yeah, if I missed anything, I will insert it in a later clip at any point in the video. And yeah, vlog next week, for realsies this time, I promise. And I will see you all in the next one.